Daniel had lived with Ethan for nearly a year, and in that time, he had learned to keep certain thoughts locked tightly away. The apartment they shared in London was modest, 2 bedrooms, a small living room with mismatched furniture, and a kitchen that always smelled faintly of coffee and toast. It was the kind of place that fostered closeness by necessity, and perhaps that was why Daniel sometimes caught himself noticing Ethan in ways he knew he shouldn't. Ethan was everything Daniel wasn't. Broad-shouldered, with an easy laugh and the kind of confidence that came from never having to doubt where you belonged in the world. He worked in finance, dressed with careless sharpness, and had a fiancée, Claire, who often filled the apartment with her laughter when she visited. Daniel liked Claire. She was kind, affectionate, and genuinely seemed to adore Ethan. That was the problem. Every time she wrapped her arms around him, Daniel reminded himself that Ethan wasn't his to think about. Most of the time, Daniel managed well enough. He buried his attraction under the rhythm of his marketing job, late-night movies, and long walks that left him too tired to dwell on what couldn't be. Yet moments slipped through the cracks. Ethan sprawled shirtless on the sofa after a run, his damp hair sticking to his forehead, the casual way he would nudge Daniel with his knee during an argument about football teams, the almost careless intimacy of their friendship. Ethan treated him as if labels didn't matter, as if Daniel being gay was simply a fact rather than a barrier. It was both comforting and dangerous. One Thursday evening, after a day that had left Ethan visibly drained, the careful balance shifted. Daniel found him on the sofa, shoes kicked off, tie loosened, his head tilted back against the cushion. A football match murmured on the television, though Ethan's eyes were closed. Long day? Daniel asked, setting down 2 beers on the coffee table. Ethan cracked one eye open, offered a faint smile, and took the bottle. You have no idea. Meetings, deadlines, all of it. I feel like my shoulders are made of stone. He stretched, rolling his neck with a low groan. Daniel chuckled. That's what you get for sitting at a desk all day. True, Ethan said, then turned his head toward him with a lopsided grin. You know what I really need? A back rub. The words were tossed out lightly, almost as a joke, but they landed heavily between them. Daniel froze, caught between amusement and alarm. I don't think that's in my roommate duties, he replied, aiming for levity. Come on, Ethan said, shifting onto his stomach and tugging a cushion under his chest. I'm serious. Just 5 minutes. You'll be saving my life. His tone was playful, but the act of rolling over, exposing his back so casually, felt intimate in a way Daniel wasn't prepared for. He hesitated. This was harmless, he told himself. Friends did things like this. It wasn't crossing a line unless he let it. With a steadying breath, he placed his hands on Ethan's shoulders, the warmth of his skin startling. Ethan exhaled deeply, a sound of relief that stirred something in Daniel he had fought to bury. His fingers worked in slow circles, kneading the tight muscles beneath them. Ethan murmured his approval, dropping his head into the cushion, utterly unguarded. God, you're good at this, Ethan muttered. Better than Claire, honestly. Don't tell her I said that. The mention of her name jolted Daniel, but he forced a small laugh. Your secret's safe. Minutes stretched, the air thickening with something unspoken. Daniel tried to keep his movements mechanical, professional even, but every shift of his hands deepened the intimacy. Ethan's breath grew slower, steadier, until suddenly he rolled onto his back, eyes half open, fixed on Daniel. Daniel froze, hands hovering uncertainly. Ethan's lips curved into the faintest smile. Don't stop, he whispered, the words lodged in Daniel's chest like a spark dropped into kindling. He knew he should step back, laugh it off, retreat to the safety of friendship. But Ethan's gaze held him there, suspended in a moment that felt both forbidden and inevitable. Daniel's hands lingered above Ethan's chest, the air between them charged in a way that made every sound in the room feel magnified, the hum of the television, the faint buzz of traffic outside, even the rhythm of Ethan's breath. Don't stop, Ethan repeated, his tone softer now, almost a plea. Daniel's pulse hammered in his ears. He wanted to laugh, to brush it off as another of Ethan's careless remarks, but the look in Ethan's eyes held no trace of teasing. It was steady, almost searching. Against every instinct screaming for distance, Daniel let his palms settle gently on Ethan's chest. "You're going to regret this tomorrow," Daniel murmured. Ethan shook his head, closing his eyes as though surrendering. "I won't. Feels too good." The words threaded through Daniel's restraint, unraveling it stitch by stitch. He moved his hands slowly, pressing along Ethan's shoulders, down the firm line of his arms. The contact was innocent in action but dangerous in effect. Every glide of skin against skin blurred the boundaries they had kept for months. Ethan shifted slightly, one arm falling against the cushion, his body angled toward Daniel. "You've got magic hands, you know that." Daniel forced a smile. "I think you're just exhausted." "Maybe," Ethan replied, his eyes opening again, heavy-lidded, focused entirely on him. "But I trust you. That's why this doesn't feel strange." The statement cut deeper than Daniel expected. Trust. He swallowed hard, torn between desire and the weight of betrayal pressing in from the edges of his conscience. Claire's name hovered like a shadow, unspoken but present. Still, the pull was undeniable. Silence settled, broken only by the soft rhythm of touch and breath. Daniel felt himself leaning closer, the space between them shrinking. For a fleeting second, he thought Ethan might tilt his head, closing the distance with something irreversible. Instead, Ethan let out a low chuckle. "You're making it hard to think straight." Daniel froze, unsure if Ethan realized the irony of his words. "Then maybe we should stop," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Ethan reached up suddenly, his fingers brushing Daniel's wrist, halting his movement. The gesture was small, but it sent a shiver racing down Daniel's spine. "Just a little longer," Ethan whispered. That was the moment Daniel knew they were no longer in safe territory. This wasn't just a back rub, nor could it be excused as casual comfort between friends. This was Ethan leaning into something he should have resisted. Daniel tried to remind himself of consequences. If Claire knew, if anyone knew, what would it mean? Yet sitting there, with Ethan's hand lightly anchoring him, those thoughts dissolved. All that remained was the heat of Ethan's body beneath his touch and the quiet urgency in his voice. Minutes slipped by in dangerous quietude, until Ethan suddenly stirred, sitting up abruptly. The shift was so sudden Daniel's hands dropped to his lap. Ethan raked a hand through his hair, his expression flickering between amusement and something darker. "Sorry," he said, forcing a laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. "That got weird, didn't it?" Daniel managed a shrug, though his heart was still racing. "A little." Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. "It doesn't mean anything. Just friends, right? No one has to know." The words were meant as reassurance, but they only deepened Daniel's confusion. No one has to know. He wanted to believe Ethan's insistence, but the memory of those lingering touches and whispered requests burned too vividly to dismiss. Daniel nodded slowly, not trusting himself to speak. He knew one thing for certain, whatever they had just crossed into, there was no going back. Ethan stood, stretching his arms with a deliberate nonchalance. "I'm calling it a night. Don't overthink it, okay?" He disappeared down the hallway toward his bedroom, leaving Daniel alone on the sofa, the echo of his words hanging in the air. Daniel sat there, staring at the half-finished beers on the table, his mind replaying every second with torturous clarity. When he finally moved, it wasn't to turn off the television or clean up the bottles. Instead, he leaned back, pressing his hands over his face, knowing sleep would not come easily. He could still feel Ethan's voice in his ear, low and insistent, "Don't stop." The following morning arrived with a brightness that mocked Daniel's sleepless night. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting long beams across the counter where Ethan stood buttering toast as if nothing had happened. He greeted Daniel with an easy grin, his voice steady, casual. "Morning. Coffee's on." Daniel managed a nod, pouring himself a mug while carefully avoiding Ethan's eyes. The memory of the previous night pulsed between them like an invisible current. Every word felt heavier, every silence more pronounced. Ethan, however, seemed determined to behave as though nothing had changed. He joked about the football score, teased Daniel about his rumpled hair, and slid the plate of toast across the table. For a moment, Daniel almost let himself believe the distance could be patched up with laughter and routine. But beneath the surface, the memory lingered. Ethan's whispered "don't stop," the warmth of his hand against his wrist. That evening, Claire arrived. Her presence filled the apartment in a way Daniel could never compete with. She hugged Ethan tightly, kissed him with unguarded affection, and chattered about her week. Daniel watched from the edge of the living room, smiling politely, feeling like a guest in his own home. Guilt pressed heavy in his chest. He shouldn't resent her, yet every touch she gave Ethan sharpened the ache he carried. Dinner was lively, though Daniel spoke little. Claire's laughter rang through the small space, and Ethan played his part well, attentive and loving. But Daniel noticed the flickers, moments when Ethan's eyes drifted toward him, lingering just a second too long before snapping back to her. It was subtle, but enough to remind Daniel that he wasn't alone in remembering. When Claire finally left, the apartment fell quiet. Ethan lingered by the window, staring out at the city lights, his shoulders tense. Daniel pretended to tidy the table, though his hands shook. "You've been quiet," Ethan said at last, his voice low. Daniel forced a shrug. "Just tired." Ethan turned then, his expression softer, conflicted. He hesitated before stepping closer. "I haven't stopped thinking about it. Last night." The words landed like a confession Daniel both dreaded and craved. "Ethan, I know," Ethan interrupted, running a hand through his hair. "I shouldn't have let it happen. Claire, she deserves better. But when you touched me, He broke off, exhaling sharply. "I don't want to pretend it didn't happen." Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to push him away, to demand he return to the safety of loyalty, but instead he whispered, "Then what do you want?" Ethan's answer came not in words but in movement. He stepped forward, closing the gap, his hand finding Daniel's shoulder with hesitant urgency. Their eyes locked, the silence thick, before Ethan finally leaned in. The kiss was tentative at first, a question hanging in the air, but when Daniel didn't pull back, it deepened, charged with everything they had denied. The world seemed to narrow to the heat of their mouths, the press of Ethan's body, the unspoken admission that they had crossed the line completely. For a few dizzying minutes, nothing else existed, no guilt, no fiancé, no rules. When they finally broke apart, Ethan's breathing was ragged. He stared at Daniel as if trying to memorize him, then whispered, "No one can ever know." Daniel nodded, though his heart pounded with equal parts exhilaration and dread. The weight of betrayal pressed in, but so did the undeniable thrill of being chosen, if only in secret. Later that night, alone in his bed, Daniel lay awake replaying every detail. His lips still tingled, his skin still burned with the echo of Ethan's touch. Sleep eluded him, replaced by the dangerous truth. They had gone too far to retreat, yet had no safe path forward. He knew this wasn't the end. If anything, it was only the beginning of a secret neither of them could resist. The days that followed blurred into a careful routine, but Daniel could not shake the feeling that every moment carried hidden weight. He still laughed at Michael's dry jokes, still helped fold laundry, still joined him at Sunday dinners with Michael's parents. Yet beneath the surface, each action felt rehearsed, as if he were playing a role in a play where one wrong line could shatter the set that he thought the guilt might dull with time, but instead, it sharpened. The silence between them, once merely dull, now pulsed with accusation. Every time Michael smiled without suspicion, Daniel felt both relief and dread. Relief that his secret remained buried, dread that he was building a life on a fault line that could erupt without warning. One evening, Daniel found himself staring at Michael as he read on the sofa, glasses perched lightly on his nose, a lamp casting a soft halo around him. Michael looked peaceful, almost boyish in his concentration. Daniel felt his throat close, the thought rising unbidden, "I don't deserve him." The weight of that truth made him set down his drink, his hand trembling slightly. Later that night, he dreamt of Ethan. Not of the act itself, but of the way Ethan had looked at him across the bar, like he mattered, like he was still capable of sparking desire. When he woke, the image lingered, and Daniel wondered which haunted him more, the betrayal itself, or the fact that part of him longed for that validation again. At work, he struggled to focus. Deadlines slipped by, and colleagues noticed his distracted air. His sketches lacked their usual boldness, his presentation stumbled. When his manager asked if everything was all right, Daniel forced a smile and claimed he was just tired. It was the same lie he told Michael, the same mask he wore for everyone who couldn't see the fracture beneath. One night, while clearing away dinner plates, Michael asked casually, "Are you happy?" The question landed with such force that Daniel nearly dropped the dishes. He managed a laugh, shaky and forced. "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" But Michael's eyes lingered on him, searching, as though he sensed a shift he couldn't name. Daniel retreated to the balcony afterward, the night air cool against his skin. He realized then that secrecy had a way of isolating, of fencing him off from the very person he lived with. Michael's presence was steady, but Daniel felt increasingly apart, as though the secret had built a wall invisible to anyone else. That he began to notice cracks in Michael too. The long hours, the exhaustion etched into his features, the way his laughter came less easily these days. Perhaps they had both been drifting long before Ethan entered the picture. Perhaps the betrayal was not the cause but the symptom of something neither had confronted, yet the thought offered no comfort. It only made the silence heavier. One weekend, they attended a friend's birthday party. Surrounded by chatter and clinking glasses, Daniel watched Michael interact with old university friends, animated and relaxed in a way Daniel hadn't seen in months. He realized with a pang that Michael was still capable of lightness, still capable of connection. The problem wasn't Michael alone, it was the distance Daniel had allowed to grow between them. Walking home, Michael slipped his arm through Daniel's, a gesture so familiar it nearly broke him. Daniel forced a smile, but inside, he was unraveling. He wanted to confess, to lay the truth bare and see whether their relationship could withstand the weight. But fear held him back. Fear of destroying what little remained, fear of becoming the villain in a story they had once built together. That night, lying awake again, Daniel understood something he hadn't before. The secret wasn't going away. It had embedded itself in their life, shaping his choices, coloring his thoughts, shadowing every tender moment. And unless he faced it, through confession, or change, or some reckoning yet unknown, it would consume not only his love for Michael but also the version of himself he still wanted to be. The echo of that night with Ethan no longer lived only in memory, it lived in every silence, every hesitation, every breath beside the man he loved.